At Friday's close of business on the East Coast, Australia had bowled India out for 150 to open the Test summer and lay an early marker against the tourists. As markets open this morning, Australia's stocks have collapsed, bound for heavy and humiliating defeats. Performances like this reverberate. Think Sunday Bloody Sunday, Boxing Day 2010. Ricky Ponting's Australia is bowled out for 98 on cricket's showpiece occasion, triggering innings defeats in Melbourne and Sydney. That Ashes drubbing prompted the Argus review. Yesterday was the worst day on home soil since the national batting crisis of Hobart 2016. It prompted rare bloodletting at selection and the ill-judged intrusion by administrators into the dressing room, setting up the chain reaction that ultimately led to the sandpaper disgrace. When this happens at home, it's not an isolated event. Australia was embarrassed by India under the blazing Perth sun. The home side battered into oblivion like rarely before, left to resort to half-cocked plans and banal tactics as the helplessness took hold. Then, as Australia has done to so many broken opponents, the batters were marched to the gallows at dusk and brutally sawn off. The symbolism was everywhere you looked. India had both the chosen one and the reigning deity standing in blazing triumph. Yashasvi Jaiswal batted as if he were fulfilling a prophecy. Virat Kohli showed he's not one to hand over torches, not for now, at least. They revelled in each other's dominance and their opponents quaked at their might. Australia employed Marnus Labuschagne as its enforcer, the absurdity of which had to be seen to be believed. By the end, Kohli treated the idea with the disdain it was begging for, while the first gamer pummeled the local hero mercilessly. To close a day that will live in Indian folklore, the fast bowling captain crafted a cruel phase to inflict maximum damage. Australia pushed its debutant opener out to face the first volley. Jasprit Bumrah and the devil in the pitch saw Nathan McSweeney last only 4 balls. Having sacrificed a lamb, the captain strode forth. This image I liked. Captains go down with sinking ships. Pat Cummins has never been a night watchman, but if souls were to be lost, the leader was prepared to face the reckoning. He didn't last and punched his blade as he fell. That left the wretchedly jittery and chronically uncertain Labuschagne exposed. Presumably the indignity of a second layer of tail-end protection was too undignified to contemplate. Where once we basked in the summer of Marnus, he is currently the lost boy. So contorted in his mind, he determined to leave a ball that was cannoning into middle and off. And then he reviewed the decision to relive in forensic detail the horror of his misjudgment, at which point the umpires called the fight, the only small mercy of the day. The grim-faced carried a sense of shell shock through the Christmas festival in the parkland surrounding the stadium. The band on stage cheerily asked who'd been at the cricket. Few were in a mood to admit to such a shame. As the sun rises over Optus Stadium, Australia is staring at complete and abject defeat. The cause is lost, but the manner in which Australia meets its fate matters profoundly. There has to be some fight in the batting, and it shouldn't just be pride on the line, but the right to play the next test. The prevailing question is what represents a proportional response. To abandon all plans after one test would be reactionary. Inaction, though, would be unforgivable, an abdication of responsibility. In any sport, change is demanded after such a performance. We've noted for a long time this team values support and stability as its cornerstone, but it has to be met with performance and accountability, and that equation is now out of balance. The signs were there throughout last summer. This isn't about 2 days of cricket. There's been a tendency to rationalise diminished returns out of existence rather than acknowledging the warning signs. We noted during the mediocre Australian bat-off that the search for the new opener would be largely academic if the established players didn't churn out industrial-sized runs. We were told you can't make industrial-sized runs in Australia anymore. I saw a notionally undermanned and theoretically struggling Indian lineup do just that through commitment, discipline, skill, and most of all, hunger. It's time to demand elite performance with consequence at the end of it. It's time for integrity, not coddling in selection. The Labuschagne question has answered itself. It's not forever, but it is for now. Labuschagne needs to go back to the next Shield game and bat like his career is on the line. Any further decisions revolve around how today unfolds and who are the alternatives. Just as happened with India, when they beat Australia at the Gabba to win the last series with a cast of understudies and seat fillers, there's a shuddering realisation of the chasm in depth as stark as the gap between population. India will win here with 5 notional first-choice players missing or left on the shelf. They'll do it with 7 players in their 20s and 5 who brought a total of 10 tests in experience to these shores. By contrast, Australia doesn't know who the next man up is. Our amateur national selection committee will likely throw the whole lot out this morning. And while I won't dissuade you from doing so, that's not terribly helpful either. Proportional change will be essential. There are players in form, despite the pretense that no one is knocking the door down. Every question is on the table after a calamity like this. This team wasn't ready for the ferocity of India's attack. When last the first choice team played, it was pathetic in an ODI in Adelaide. They seemed to be there under obligation and then took leave to prioritise the test series. But here they have been shoddy. No balls, wides and byes, missed fields, missed chances and missed run-outs, clueless with the bat and by the end impotent with the ball. If there was any thought that the test players would head home to rest in preparation for Adelaide, that's the first thing to change. All leave is cancelled. Get into camp and get to work. Australia chose fresh rather than match hardened, and they have the bloodied nose and soon a 1-0 deficit for their misjudgment. Got to get something out of today's play. It's a hot-blooded morning. That's why we rely on the wisdom and experience of Robert Craddock. Hello to you, Crash.
G'day, Gerard. And yeah, through the maelstrom, it's thanks for having us on. And I'm loving the fact that it's generated some incredible cricket chat. And it's proved that people still do care about cricket. And that's what I love. The nation's alive again. It's going to be a great summer. It really is.
All right, give me your snap judgment. What do you feel most passionately from the events of the test so far?
Oh, well, I just feel that, just quickly, to a few different topics. One, Jasprit Bumrah, we are watching a man who in time could be regarded as the greatest fast bowler of all time. I mean, he is averaging 20 per test wicket, and his home nation is India. I mean, Dennis Lillee didn't take a wicket in India. Like, he didn't play a test there. I mean, they're supposed to be slaves over there, the fast bowlers. And for the record he's accumulating, and it's a fair body of evidence too, 41 tests. So don't think that Malcolm Marshall or Dennis Lillee was any better than Jasprit Bumrah. He is absolutely superb. Seriously. Secondly, I thought the last session last night was as shambolic a session as I've seen for Australia in many years. It almost took us back to the mid-1980s when Alan Border was captain and Australia went 4 years without winning a test series. And you just had that impending feeling of doom. And just a quick one, I'm just incredibly impressed by young Isaac McDonald, the Optus Stadium curator, who at age 27 has produced what I must say is just a masterpiece of a test wicket. This is what you want out of a test wicket. I know the batsmen will not agree for the first day, but it was blood and thunder on the first day with wickets falling everywhere. Then it handed over to the batsmen, and now it's back to the bowlers with cracks. I mean, that is a gorgeous test wicket. I've been bag and drop in pitches for 20 years, but I've got to stop because they are improving it, and this is, to me, this is just what a test wicket should be. Anyone who's ever grown anything in the backyard knows how hard it is to tame Mother Nature. So in 3 days, he's had 3 different themes. Superb young man. You get a gold star.
Robert Craddock, snap judgments with us for the Drain Man clears and relines without damage. Okay, let's delve a little bit. Momentum is the god of modern sport. How much momentum is India gaining here for a series on these shores?
Well, Gerard, let's do the maths. If they win today, as we all expect them to, they actually go 1.5 tests up because they hold the trophy. So they will fly to Adelaide thinking, guys, if we win one of the next 4 tests, Australia have to win the other 3 to take the trophy, which they're not going to do. That won't happen. So I'm expecting Australia to win tests, but Gerard, they've got 5 good players coming back. They've got their world-class spinners, Ashwin and Jadeja, who weren't chosen here. They've got Rohit Sharma, just flown in after the birth of his second child, the captain. They've got Shubham Gill, probably ready for Brisbane. And they've got Mohammad Shami, just getting ready to make an appearance in the Test series, mid-series, who a lot of people feel, a lot of the Australian batsmen used to rate as threatening as Bumrah. So, hey, and can I give you the other side of the coin? Can I give it to you?
Please.
I mean, these are the Sheffield Shield averages. I listened to all your callers about, we need new batsmen in. All right, top 4 run scorers in the Sheffield Shield. Alex Carey, he's already in there. Hilton Cartwright, no, he's belongs to another era. Marcus Harris, they don't like him. He missed out, remember? And Peter Hanscombe, no, they've lost interest in him as well. So, you know what I mean? It's okay saying, get rid of this guy, get rid of that guy. I'm worried about the depth. I just don't see anything or anyone in Sheffield Shield cricket who you could choose in a test match with any measure of confidence as a batsman against the great Jay Bumrah.
Let's talk about Marnus, Crash, on 2 fronts. It's the worst tactic I've ever seen from an Australian team, using Marnus as the enforcer to bowl bouncers in that circumstance. I was appalled by the setup of it. And to do it a couple of times, I'm glad Kohli treated it with the disdain that he did. So maybe that side of things first. It was undignified, both for him and for the team, I felt.
Yeah, and the crowd are onto it too. There was that nice little sign in the crowd, Marnus, you've got to bowl at 135 kilometres an hour. And he was straining, almost popping his shoulder off and getting to about 129. So you're right. It's a tactic that it proves you are absolutely under siege. If he's got the ball in his hand. And I like the way on air you were sort of suitably angry about it and almost seemed to throw down the headphones, Gerard, and storm out of your shift at the end of Marnus's spell. Yeah, so I think a lot of Australians felt that way because, he shouldn't be bowling. It should never get to that stage. I actually, strangely enough, I actually do get the leg spin from around the wicket.
Yep.
Sometimes you can just hit a foot mark and it produces a crazy ball. But this bouncing stuff it's silly.
It's like it was a national joke in the lead up to the series. Oh, Marnus will bowl medium paces. And I actually didn't think it would happen. But if it did, I thought it would happen on a silly day in the 4th day of a rain-affected test in Sydney, and it would be done for a lark. This was done very early in the series. It was done with premeditation. If you want to bowl bouncers and rough up an opposition, Pat Cummins, you do that. Don't give the ball to Marnus. That's just the failure in planning there, and that I'm just appalled by that. But that's a side issue. The real issue is Marnus's batting, Crash, and this is not a 3-day question. This is a 12-month issue.
Yeah, and look, over the last 19 tests, Marnus's test average is about 30. And it always worried me when he would fall into a downward spiral, which he kept at bay for a lot of years. He had 3 years where he averaged over 60. But he's one of those guys who thinks so much about the game. Now, a while back, Gerard, I did a bit of a study on cricketers who are ultra successful, and there was only one common thread amongst all the guys I talked to, and I tell you what it was. They got escaped from the game when they weren't playing. Like Ricky Ponting would play golf, Mark Waugh would go to the races, Stephen Waugh would take his camera out sightseeing, Glenn McGrath would go fishing, Matthew Hayden would do cooking and fishing, but they cut the cord and freshened themselves up. It's always worried me that Marnus thinks about the game so much, he almost stews in his juices. That's fine when you're playing well. It almost keeps you up there. But when you have a bad year, I think it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy of you question, then you re-question everything. And I saw something on television yesterday where the players were asked, who don't you want to sit next to on the plane? It was a joke. It was a comedy piece. But 6 out of 7 of them said Marnus. And I know what they were thinking, but because, cricket theories deluxe and everything like that, and it can be too much. And I'm seeing a very agitated mind now with Marnus. Like, even to review the decision yesterday when he was palpably stone dead plumb, hitting middle and off, that should never have been a review. And so the things which drove him to the top of the tree in world cricket, most surprisingly, because he was only averaging 32 in Sheffield Shield cricket for a few seasons, are now dragging him down, I think, the obsession with the game. So, yeah, he's got a lot of thinking to do. He's still averaging 49, which is why he's hard to drop. Because, Gerard, let's go back to our Sheffield Shield batting lists. Who are you dropping him for? That's what I want to know from the listeners. Please call in.
Inglis is in the squad, Crash. So if you distill this down to a very basic question, who is more likely to make runs in Adelaide? Marnus or Inglis? What's the answer?
Batting number 3, I'd still say Marnus. And here's the thing, Gerard, Josh Inglis is a pretty good batsman, but he's averaging 36 and, he bats in the middle order. So let's not, as Ricky Ponting said about a month ago, quite cheekily, he said, when I was playing, if you average 35, 36, your coaches would say, have you thought about taking up a trade or maybe studying or getting a profession? Maybe you could be an accountant because you're not going to be a cricketer. So we're selling Inglis as, oh, wow, he could come in to destroy him. Really? At number 3, you think so? Against Bumrah?
He might make 30,
okay. I'm not happy with that.
He might make 30. Marnus has got paralysis now. You rarely see a batter in elite cricket reach a stage like this. It would be a miracle if he made a run.
Yeah, you say that, and I think, let's not forget, in his last test in New Zealand, he made 90. So
you have to overlook a lot to get to the 90, though. And he was fortunate to still be in the team at that stage.
Yep. Yeah, I don't like where he's going at the moment, but that last 19 tests, he actually is averaging 30. Like, it's not averaging 6, but he reminds me a little bit. I still remember Greg Chappell saying once when he had this run of about 6 or 7 ducks and he went and saw a sports psychologist, and the sports psychologist said, Greg, are you watching the ball? And he said, yeah, I am. And he said, actually, you know what? I'm actually watching an area which is about the size of a television screen. And that's where the ball is. He said, but I'm not focusing on the ball properly. I'm not. And it just sort of, when I'm seeing Marnus playing, I'm seeing agitation and all that. And, look, he could easily, I don't think he will be dropped for Adelaide, but I totally agree with you. He's chewing up with agitation at the moment. And I said this cricket obsession he has, which was his great strength, I think is now slowly dragging him to the floor. And hey, Gerard, he could easily, on Saturday, there's no Sheffield Shield round. I wouldn't be shocked if he played club cricket for Redlands to try and get some runs, when I'm actually thinking maybe he just needs to get away from the game and go fishing for a few days.
Well, I think that, so we fundamentally disagree here, Crash, is they've had their rest. They have been away from cricket. It's time to get to work. I would contemplate dropping Marnus into the Prime Minister's 11 game. I would certainly put him back to Shield cricket rather than playing the next test. Not forever, just for now. They've had their downtime. Marnus's issues were clear by the end of last summer and haven't been resolved across the winter. So if Australia doesn't change this team, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it feels to me that's where you're leaning, where's the accountability?
Well, you're right, but I'm struggling to come up with better choices. That's the thing. I'm struggling to come up with the batsmen. And I know you love English. At number 3 against Bumrah, I don't love that. See, I would happily drop Marnus if there was a David Hussey averaging 54, which he was, outside the test team, or a Brad Hodge or one of those guys, because I just think he needs a break. And it sounds funny to say it at the start of the season. He did go to Glamorgan and play the off-season there. So in other words, but you're right. He just looks like a walking wicket. And I remember when Marnus went through that 3-year passage, when he averaged 60 each year, He just knew where his off stump was. He was a very, very good lever of the ball. And that art he has just completely lost. He was the same with McSweeney yesterday. They were so consumed about the ball that was going to leave them and get the edge, and they were thinking to themselves, don't play, that they forgot about the one that was coming into them. And that was beautiful, beautiful, honey sweet bowling, as good as you'd want to see. To leave the ball like that, that's hitting middle and off, that, as Marnus Labuschagne did, that is a sign of a muddled mind. And I agree, it's a sign of a guy who deserves a rest. But I'm just not sure if I could choose English at confidence at number 3.
What did you think of sort of the overall demeanour of the Australian team as they were ground into the dust?
I thought it was just so ordinary. And the silence, Gerard, over stump cam. Normally, an Australian team, when it's playing well, is a loud team. You hear it through the stump cam, the constant chatter, the applause. There was nothing. And I tell you who had a sneaky, ordinary day was Alex Carey. There was about 24 buys, which is a lot. And I know some of them were beyond his control, but I just felt there was no sound from Alex. I just could barely hear him. And the keeper is your drumbeat in the field, so I thought that was poor. And I've also got this issue. I feel Australia's lost their aura. Since Sandpapergate, they've become a very nice team. And that's fine. But as soon as you start playing like Methodist ministers and all that, and being really nice to the opposition. And there's a few reasons behind it too, including last night's IPL auction. No one wants to offend India anymore, because if you fall out with India, you might lose an IPL deal. And I said it today in the story that there was as much chance that Australia were going to take a big stance against an Indian player with a big sort of blue or flashpoint as there was of Kevin Rudd sending having a racy criticism of Donald Trump this week. Like it wasn't going to happen. So I'm not sure this nice guy demeanour, it's okay when you're winning, it looks fabulous. But when you're losing, you look so crestfallen, downbeaten, out of answers. And it doesn't have to be sledging, Gerard. We said that Shane Warne, the opposition always used to say, his intimidation started with his eyes. He'd be at the top of his run-up and he'd just look at you as he flicked the ball from hand to hand. And it was a look of, real steel, and it was intimidating. And that's part of sport. That's part of cricket. You don't have to be the ugly Australians or anything like that, which they unashamedly were about the Sandpapergate era, and it had to change, and it did change, but there is a middle ground. It shouldn't be a crime to stare or to have some body. I didn't sense any imposing body language whatsoever. None. And I think it costs them when they're on the back foot, because there's a sense of inertia, isn't there? Like a floatiness about them, just a driftiness. And it was really there yesterday, wasn't it?
Do you think they were ready for it? No balls, wides, byes, missed fields, missed chances, missed run-outs. That they weren't buttoned up for this test match.
Correct. Josh Hazlewood defended Pat Cummins' decision last night not to play a Sheffield Shield game before it. I have to say I disagree with that. I think bowlers need bowling. Pat hadn't played a red ball game for ages. And, there's a certain hardness that comes with it. And I must admit this, Gerard, too. 2 weeks ago, Australia rested all their bowlers rather than send them to Perth for a one-day game against Pakistan. I actually thought they might do the opposite. I thought they might send them all there to Perth and just say, hey, this is the first test venue. Just have another bowl there. Get the feel of it again. Bowl on the practice wickets. Just get the vibe of everything. There was something to be said for actually sending the whole damn lot of them over there. But none of them went. And I think, there was... You're so right, Gerard, to spotlight the extras column. I don't think Australia's ever conceded more extras in a test forever than they have in this thing. And it's, the sloppy wides, no balls. How many no balls did Mitchell Marsh bowl at his pace? Was it 4 or 5 or 6 or something? It shouldn't happen. So they were soft going into this test. I think they will improve, and I think they will win test this series. And this will be such a good series. I'm just excited by it, really am. But, soft is the word. And India, yes, they were beaten 3-0 by New Zealand, but they were playing. They were getting experience. And just one last one. I'd love to hear your opinion on this, Gerard. Remember when Australian teams just dominated India, body language and with a bit of chat in the field. And to have Jaiswal saying to Stark, you're not bowling fast enough or you're too slow, like, wow, some of these statements, and then basically